Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us on Bald Convos. Even though I'm wearing a hat, I am in fact bald. And I am joined by Missy Krasner. Missy, how's it going?
Hey, I think you definitely need to expose the ball head at some point during our conversation, just to let everybody in on the joke.
There's what's it called? The my black hair is coming out. I didn't
Yeah,
have a chance to shave it today. So
I know that.
uh
Mine's got the same thing going on.
yeah.
It's called entrepreneurial sprout.
Yeah, it's mother's father. So when all my cousins get together, all of the men is that. So but I decided, Missy, like maybe 10 years earlier than I ever was going to. I was just going to shave it and then get used to it. And it's actually made life a lot a lot easier. I'm really excited to chat with you here today. You are the first guest ever that we're live on like everything. So like I got Instagram to work, Twitter X, LinkedIn, YouTube. So wherever you're tuning in from today, hopefully we can get people to check it out on the channel they prefer.
That's excellent. I feel like I'm in this special time that we're having an inaugural kind of like broadcast on multiple channels. That's great.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks so much for being here today. Obviously, you and I have known each other now for a little while. Before we started doing some like podcasts together, I know you've been doing like the AI for Dummies series that we have on Titans of Healthcare, which has been awesome. Some great recent episodes. Can't wait for future ones that we end up doing.
Yep.
Let's just dive it. Like for anyone that doesn't know, I highly doubt they don't know you. But for anyone that doesn't know, just kind of give us the quick rundown of your background, your career, and then we'll dig into just having a good conversation today.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, listen, I think I'll tell a couple things that I don't normally say since we're on so many different channels. So before I sort of created a career in digital health, everything from sort of being in big tech like Google, Amazon, Box, to policy, working in government with Dr. David Brailer, to foundation, nonprofits, to startups. I actually was a theater major. Fancy that. I did my undergrad at UCLA and my grad at Stanford. And it's just been an interesting transfer. The whole reason why I got into healthcare is my dad's a nephrologist, a kidney specialist. And a lot of people know my story. I was an undergrad at UCLA, and my mom, out of the blue, got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She was pretty asymptomatic and just had a couple weird things. And then boom, she got slammed with this diagnosis. Hard diagnosis to get. Parents didn't sort of like deal with that well, and they ended up divorcing. And what I thought was really interesting out of all of that is that my mom, as soon as she was separated and legally divorced from my father, could not get health insurance. It was this is pre-Obamacare. This is during actually the Clintons and the Health Security Act, when Hillary Clinton kind of like hid in a room with a bunch of policy wonks for 90 days and everybody like sort of, attacked. So it was during that, it was all during that time where if you had a pre-existing condition, you essentially got rated out of the system. And so I just got fascinated by the inequities in healthcare. Essentially it's not healthcare, it's sick care. No one could get insured. I just, the whole policy angle there was fascinating. And so I shifted from being in theater. I went to school with Jack Black. I mean, everybody at UCLA had an agent, was commercially getting work. I had an agent, I was out there, but I got very, very interested in this through a personal story and ended up shifting gears, went to Stanford and did a degree in sort of, I was like half in the GSB in the business school and half in like sort of a comm school. And just really started looking at healthcare policy and administration. And that was the twist for me that kind of put me into this career of digital health as both an operator, an investor, a policy person. And I've just been in it for now, 35 years. I'm in my 50s. So woo, it's been a long ride, but a fun one.
No one knew that, Missy, before you just volunteered that information. By the way, I'm just so excited to have you here. I love your energy. I did not know you went to school with Jack Black.
I did. And you know what? He's just as talented. I mean, he was just unbelievable back then, both musically and from an acting standpoint. I've gone to school with a lot of people who've ended up making great careers in the industry of entertainment. Lots of people. I'll often be at home sitting down watching Homeland. Homeland. With Claire Danes and this and that, and there'll be like 5 people that I went to school with that are on that show, and I'm like, I can't believe it. It's very weird when you're watching someone that you knew personally really well or you worked with, sort of, up on your big screen in your living room, and it does make someone wonder, like, oh wow, I wonder if I would have just stuck with it. But I love my career in digital health and healthcare. I think it's been fun, and I've definitely spent some time in DC in the policy worlds as well. So it's taken me lots of different directions.
And a lot of people recently know you for like the work you've done with Redesign Health, right? So over the last couple of years, you've spent some time at Redesign. Talk us through kind of, since you've been working with a lot of the portfolio companies there, kind of, I mean, healthcare's changed even a lot in the last few years, right? From when you guys were kind of rolling out those initial companies to now, kind of, what are some of the things that we went through, went through a pandemic and all those virtual care companies.
Massive learning.
What are some of those biggest learnings?
Let me just set it up. So, I mean, I think, for me, I sort of just landed, I sort of did 3 tours in big tech, and, I sort of created this weird niche of like, hey, can big tech really do something in healthcare? And so, I think I jumped out of a policy moment with Dr. David Briller at the first office of the National Coordinator for Health IT. And for people out there that are not super diehards in the health IT or digital health world, or what we used to call e-health back in my day, it really just meant like, hey, how we have a drug czar for the United States? Well, we have a health IT czar. And this was during George Bush's second term. He was running against Kerry, and he came in, and the idea of being able to really help physicians move away from the manila folder and move to a software platform, we call those electronic health records, of course, that allow you to chart. So I had done a tour with him, really sort of, help write the HITECH Act, all the kind of stuff around meaningful use and EHR certification kind of came out of that time. And then Google recruited me. So I spent some time early days with Google and Google Health, then jumped to Box, ran industries with Karen and a whole bunch of other people in healthcare, then jumped to Amazon. So by the time I was at Amazon, I think halfway through my tour at Amazon, they had Amazon Care, they had just bought PillPack, Amazon Pharmacy. They were doing some really interesting things across AWS and healthcare and life sciences. Lots going on at Amazon. Still lots going on with Amazon. I have a lot of hopes there. I hit the COVID pandemic, and it was, as many of us remember, the first big moment that I have seen any kind of real movement in digital health, like leap forward by 20 years. And it was, the entire delivery system was crumbling, and we had all kinds of access issues. And so everybody was forced to go to virtual. The regulatory environment completely swang open, and the digital front door was with us. And I just got so tickled pink by that opportunity in the midst of massive fear and need in this global pandemic, that I was like, I'm leaving Amazon. I want to get back to the investing side, but I don't want to do traditional venture. I had done a tour at Morgan Stanley Ventures / Canvas. We had done Practice Fusion, Doximity, great firms, still in touch with all those folks, love what they do. But I wanted to do something that was a little bit more hands-on. And so Redesign was a fantastic new platform. Some people would refer to Redesign as a venture studio. I think it's a lot more. It's like a company creation platform or innovation platform, specifically for tech-enabled healthcare services or digital health. And so what we did there is 3 to 4 months of like market research on a concept. It's either a de novo concept with business model innovation, or a fast follow that's like someone's like a category maker. They're opening up something and we're like, wow, that's some serious product market fit. Let's run after that and see if we can actually do a couple more and expand the market. So that's what we did. We had I started there with they had like 12 companies that they had incubated from scratch. We do not write checks to outside entrepreneurs. We literally research the concept, do industry teardown, buyer call down, kind of map out the blueprint of what the IP and the product's going to look like, and then fund it. And then, folks like me, which were called venture chairs, would step in and try to essentially run the company until we found our CEO. CEO would come in, and then we help the CEO build their founding team. We march them towards an MVP, and then we help them fundraise. And so my job is to take a board seat after we incubate and launch that company. And then I'm just with the company as long as they'll have me, right? In the redesign seat. So that's what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And it really married my investing experience at Morgan Thaler / Canvas, along with some of my operating experience. It's just been super fun. So 7 companies later, and now I'm sort of transitioning into some other work. But it's been a blast, an absolute blast.
Yeah, now you're working on something stealth, right? Is there a timeline yet on when you will give us some additional information? Anyway, you put stealth next to your name and you're working on something, people get excited. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that I think, and I'm still very active with Redesign, by the way, too. I'm still in 5 companies, and I've got some pretty impressive companies there. I think you've met a couple. But the idea here is that I've learned so much about kind of how do you efficiently activate and start a company. And so, for me, it's like taking a lot of those learnings and a lot of those best practices and applying it to some spaces that I'm super excited about. And I think that clearly we're in this moment where we literally are having a technology shift. It's another watershed moment. COVID forced a watershed moment. And sure, the industry is completely having a boomerang and a bounce back, because now we're sort of past that pandemonium and that kind of craziness. And so there is some market bounce back, and we can get into all of that later, which is challenging in our market right now. It's challenging from the VC perspective. It's challenging from valuations perspective. It's challenging for what we're seeing with Medicare Advantage and some of the medical costs that are coming out of there. There's a lot going on in the industry that I think is like complete exhaust and off-gassing from the COVID time. And also just a lot of other kind of exogenous factors, but we're seeing a big sort of effect there. And I think there was a time where, I was beating back VCs because we were in term sheet wars, right? Because the market was flying really high and everybody was rushing towards funding, digital health companies that had a virtual component. And now I think we're seeing a little bit of that contracting in around virtual. Now people are sort of returning to in-person, but you cannot be in this business today without having an omni-channel experience. You just can't. Like, that's kind of what we took and learned from COVID.
But we had the one of the issues on the virtual care front was it feels like when that funding was regularly available, we had a bunch of copycat companies that just launched up, right? The barrier to entry was actually fairly low at the time. A lot of people were using when remember they were allowed to use Zoom and things like that to provide virtual visits. And we're starting to see that consolidation continue to happen, whether companies are shutting down or they're merging. Obviously, everyone knows that the public markets were not too friendly to these digital health companies. Although some of it is just interesting with the markets, right? Because you actually look at some of the companies, they have a lower valuation than actually cash on hand, which is kind of wild, right?
Wild.
But it's to your point, like you need to have that virtual presence, but I think we're starting to see that hybrid type offering, which is very much welcomed. Do you think we'll ever have that kind of moment again where like virtual care becomes kind of that go-to option? Or do you think it's like, okay, that was pandemic driven, a lot of it is going to need to be hybrid care now?
Oh no, I absolutely believe, particularly because we have such labor shortages and we have such access issues right now, that we are going to have to figure out how to not only do virtual, but how to actually start automating low acuity, noisy traffic. I would say there are lots of interesting companies out there. And the whole reason why I'm super interested in the Gen AI space is because I think that is the next watershed moment. Like, right? Like, we had to have a pandemic to force us into virtual and to relax the regulatory environment. But just the sheer possibility of what we could be seeing with Gen AI, and specifically healthcare is such a documents-based, text-based. Sure, we have a lot of structured data. A lot of that structured data is captured. And for the last 30 years, we've been in this classical environment of mining that data that's structured and doing very expensive point-to-point integrations with best-of-breed vendors to make that data extract, move to point A to point B, create data lakes, like whatever it is. But we have not figured out an intelligence layer, right? That was just basically algorithmic driven, a lot of machine learning and classical AI. But now we're in this generative stage where I think you can make complex decisions. Like at some point, you're going to have agents. You're going to have like a bot that's an AI bot that's trying to do kind of a, let's just say, I'm just making this up, like some kind of prior auth decision. And then you're going to have another company's bot that's going to fight that prior auth decision. You're going to have two agents. It's going to be sort of an agent to agent kind of conversation. And I think that's from an efficiency standpoint and or from sort of like how we actually streamline some of the back office in healthcare, which is so expensive and so manual. So that's this next watershed moment. And that's why I'm super excited to start spending a little time incubating there. And, hopefully we'll have news soon.
I get so frustrated when you hear kind of the haters on AI that like, those are the people that should be worried when we talk about automate. If you're fully like against, like when you run into these people that are fully against AI, specifically in the healthcare community, right? Like, oh, well, it's not there yet. Of course it's not there yet, but like it's what other technology can you see this much improvement in a matter of like, look at where we are at from earlier this year or 2 months ago, the increase. So like your vision of these different like that is going to be realized sooner rather than later. And you look at kind of, if you put out specifically healthcare administration, right? Like all the administrative parts, like the prior auth and the billing, and it is incredible how much of a percentage of that AI can actually take over with limited or some supervision. What do you think is going to be the biggest blocker, though, in terms of more wide scale adoption in healthcare of this new technology? Is it just the worry that it's still not fully there yet, or are you thinking that we'll get past that fairly quickly?
No, I actually think the biggest blocker is just going to be change management. It's just going to be like being able to actually, and for some of the bigger, larger enterprises, like our national payers, or even like some large academic medical centers. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are sort of like, hey, we're working internally. We're going to build our own small language model, or we're going to essentially we're going to work on a foundational model and then like sort of take our own data and fine tune on it. Like all of that stuff is interesting. But I think with some of the bigger enterprises that have decided to make their own investments, you just have so many divisions that you have to align and you have to gain kind of like an internal policy unison around that. I think that's just going to slow folks down. So I think you're going to see the real innovation at sort of some of the more regional, smaller players, or even some of the well-funded digital health startups that are going to start making some headway here. And it's very much like any kind of innovation curve that you would see out there. I think that all the back office stuff is going to come first. I think people are going to be very cautious when it comes to clinical. But like, for instance, I just saw a really cool demo the other day. Working couple years on Alexa, I think we were really looking at voice activated, the ability to be able to have be in an operating room and have like a hands-free Q&A like with the voice above. I think there's a lot you could do. Like this demo was just so badass. It had like an image up, like some kind of radiology image, and literally like you could have a whole conversation with the agent who was like doing a lot of the sort of pattern recognition, upfront diagnosis, and then the clinician could actually query it. And, it's very Star Trek. And it's like stuff like that I think is just augmentative. You don't have to take human out of the loop, but you can essentially expedite the entire process. It's great. We're going to see a lot of really interesting things in behavioral health, in multimodal imaging. I just think there's so much out there, and we're just at the beginning. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's Skynet. It's Skynet. It's Terminator Skynet all over again. Like it was the same haters that were like, it's the same people that are like really, really huge in HIPAA and about like sharing PHI and PII, and like in the early interoperability days, which we haven't even accomplished the kind of interoperability depth of adoption that we need with data liquidity. But, it's like everybody's like, oh my gosh, people are going to do things with your PHI and your PII. And it's like, I spend more time connecting through Meta or Facebook or Google. There's so much more data that's flowing on me than like the fact that, I might have an STD or, it's just, I think people could like sort of make a big hater case depending on like where they want to be. And those conversations are important. We need the privacy experts. We need all of that. But I think at the cost of innovation and the pace of innovation, no, thank you. Right. That's just not where I'm going to fall.
No, you're 100% right. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, you can get upset about any part of this. It's pretty incredible. I just separate, not related to healthcare. There was like some picture I saw online, but there was no context to it. And it was like of this cool like condo in Boston, right? So I took the picture and I just put it into ChatGPT and I was like, where is this? And it was like, well, you have the Charles River off to the right. So this is actually right downtown Boston near Downtown Crossing, more than likely. You pull it up, you search that. It was the exact building that it said. And it's just wild that all it was a window of the park somewhere. Incredible. And yep. It's only going to learn more, right? The more information we feed it. Because everyone always talks about how like, this is another like the Industrial Revolution and like what happened but someone goes, except this learns from itself and becomes better versus like, the assembly line isn't going to just magically get better each and every day. Right.
Right.
We do have a question for you that someone just messaged me.
Yeah.
This is from Marcus Gordon, who is, he has, I don't know if you know Marcus, but he's had a career in the healthcare communication space. He's previously been at like Informatica. Lots of digital health companies with low performing growth are entering a 2 to 3 year cash runway that's left after the COVID influx. Thoughts on the future of these companies?
Oh yeah. Great question. Yeah. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of, there's a lot of companies that are not going to make it from a seed round into a Series A. Like that's just sort of the reality. So pre this sort of period, it was all about top line performance, team, and concept. So if you had some interesting top line that you could show, and you had a scalable and you had a scalable and repeatable kind of selling motion, and the team was known with a pretty novel concept, you essentially were safe. And that is not the case anymore. Everything is about revenue, the quality. It's not just like, oh, you're hitting a revenue target, like you've got 1.5 to 2 and you're going out and raising. It's really about the quality of revenue. Essentially is it ACR? Like what kind of sort of bookings are you doing? Are they billable? Like, are they going to repeat in the same way? Are you sort of, is it consulting revenue? Is it one time? Is it POC revenue? That might not, like what do you imagine that your pricing structure is going to be elastic or change? So it's a lot of those kinds of questions. But yeah, to his question, I think what people are doing is they're hiring a lot of fractional folks. They're really managing their cash burn. And from a marketing and comm standpoint, they're trying to figure out how to do a lot more things on social, right? A lot more like content that they're producing, with the assist of ChatGPT. Really it's kind of back to guerrilla warfare and tactics around sort of getting the message out. Particularly hard when you're actually selling into the enterprise, because that takes a little bit of a different approach. I think what's going to happen is people either won't make it, or they're going to just sell whatever IP they can, or they're going to merge with someone who's better funded, or there'll be a pickup. But that is the reality that we're in today for sure.
What do you think we'll see more of? Shutdowns, mergers, acquisitions, or like full acquisitions, or selling off of assets? Which bucket we'll see the most?
Well, if you're pre-seed or seed into A, we'll see shutdowns. because generally speaking, it's hard. It's hard unless you're doing an asset sell. It's hard because you just probably don't have enough demonstrable evidence and or clientele to sort of do a merger, right? Or be picked up by another larger company. That's not to say that people won't, but it just depends. And it depends if you're really truly pre-seed or seed. There are a lot of people that are like, hi, I raised a 12 million seed round. It's like, well, that's not really a seed round, right? By normal. I'm talking about like people that have done a friends and family, or they've raised a safe. Maybe they've raised up to 1 to 2 million on a safe, or as low as, $1 million or 800. That's really sort of like, hey, I'm just trying to get up and running. I have a thesis. I need to get a proof of concept. I need to get my first customer, and I need to make sure that I can find some kind of product market fit single. Those are the folks that are probably the most vulnerable. And, look, I've started 1 million companies. I'm even starting one now. It's not to say that I'm not immune from that category myself, but I think, that's what you're signing up for if you're trying to sort of do seed stage now, and you're not someone who's bankrolling it yourself, or you're not like bootstrapping from other organic means, or you don't have like 5 or 6 pretty angels that are sort of like deep pockets and they love you. So yeah, there'll be shutdowns. There'll be people that will just sort of like, stop business and either do a fire sale, or just basically the asset just gets shelved.
You think we'll see, actually, this is probably another category, like an acqui-hire as well?
Yeah, I think that, look, when I was at Amazon, I had a whole corp dev team, and we would look at, our role at Amazon was, if a technology and or a team could hopscotch our product roadmap by 12 to 18 months, we would make that acqui-hire, or we would make that IP investment. And we'd have to do a long amount of diligence because of, we were Amazon on that. But yeah, I think, generally speaking, when you're a seed stage company, if you have 2 or 3 people, full time, generally those people as individuals, like I had a company at Redesign that was a wonderful, unbelievable idea that I think we executed a little too soon, and lots of lessons on how we executed. We stayed in fee for service too long and couldn't make the transition into value-based care, which revenue wise, we sort of needed to be over there. Fee for service is really hard. It's a volume play. And so that company ultimately did get wound down, but we did have a couple other people in the space that were interested in picking up that founding team, because that founding team had learned so much and could bring all of that institutional knowledge over to a competitor. And also we had clinicians, and it's like, if you have a clinical team, and the clinical team can actually also be entrepreneurial and has learned how to do startups, that's super valuable. So I do think there are these opportunities to do small acqui-hires, generally with a competitor that might be further along, better funded. But in general, it's unusual if it's a young team who's only been together for 2 years and has only raised up to 2 million.
So that's kind of one side of the fence in terms of companies that are at the kind of pre-seed, seed stage. Let's talk about some of these companies that raised a crazy amount of money when they had the opportunity to do so, right? Still kind of during that pandemic.
Yep.
What about those companies? Because that can sometimes be a negative. Like, it's a good problem to have. You have the cash on hand, but if they ever had to raise another round, they would all be doing. Most of these companies would be doing down rounds, right? The ones that raise, like, I'm talking about the ones a couple of years ago that raised like the 100 million. When, they wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have sort of 2 categories there. You have companies that have raised a good amount of money. They have fantastic board members and investors sitting around. Very marquee investors that have had multiple exits in the space. And that might be mixed funds. They're not just in healthcare or digital health, but they're very well known. And so you've got a good board. And so generally, if for whatever reason you're not finding product market fit, or, the first action there would probably be a leadership change, because the asset is probably pretty interesting. The infrastructure and the bones of the company is pretty interesting. And, you just need someone to come in who might have a different point of view, or might want to pivot the company in a different way. And the company still has funding. And in that case, you might want to bring a new leader in, and you might want to think about recapping, right? So there's leadership changes in that kind of scenario. And then there's, just a full recap where a company pinned at a very high valuation at one point in the market, was flying high, hit some skids, whatever the case may be. And, it's the hungry investor that sort of is like, I can mold this, would probably just want to recap. Otherwise, you're sort of thinking, hey, we're cash out in 3 months, we're cash out in 6 months, whatever, I'm gonna now run an M&A process and look for a change of control. I'm gonna, I don't want to say, people at that stage have a hard time hiring bankers because they don't have enough money to pay them. But, sometimes you'll hire someone to help rep the deal. So, one of my companies just, Series A and a B just did 2 transactions. And it was like very much like that, where a couple companies raised a lot of money. They got over their skis, had an interesting business, had enough clientele, had enough sort of interesting PCs that we wanted to pick up to expand the business, that it just really made sense. Or it was a pickup that allowed us to move into an adjacent market. So I think those are super opportunistic. And, I would say it's one company that's a little bit more well-funded with a lot more revenue, picking up another company that was sort of just, missed the mark or opened one door when they should have opened another. And sort of it took them down a different path that wasn't the right path. So yeah, those are huge opportunities to do transactions. And those transactions can look a lot of different ways, right? They can be all stock transactions. They can be acqui-hires. They could be an IP asset sell. They could be PCs, picking up, PCs to do an expansion in the state if you're an MSO PC kind of structure.
But for a lot of those companies at this point in time, those multiples, like compared to even 3 years ago, are total different ballgame, right?
Total different ballgame. Absolutely. And what I try to tell all the CEOs that I work with, and even this sort of, new group of people that I'm firing up and working with, it's hard, right? Because I feel like some of us came out of the game of, valuation points at every step, right? It's like, oh, your seed, if you're doing a safe or a convertible note, if someone puts a cap on it, it singles to the industry. And then it's like on your next round. And yeah, there's some mechanics there, but in general, it's a lot of Disney. It's like a lot of Disneyland metrics. Like it's really about when you start driving revenue and you start really you have a pipeline where you've got some interesting quarterly business review productions. Like, I think that's when, it doesn't really matter this early on. Sure, you want to be pinned at the right place. You want to single the industry, but I think we're coming out of this time where founders really get hung up on that. And this is just not the time to be hung up on that. It's all about, get fast money, get money that you trust, get people around your watering hole that can open up doors for you, that really, really believe in what you're trying to do and believe in you as a team. And then just go and learn and execute. And you're going to have 50, 60 different twists and turns. Even companies that are like Series C, Series D. I have friends that I mentored when I was at StartX, Stanford's accelerator, back in my Morgan Thaler days. These are companies that have blown up. They're like Series D plus, right? And I still have the founders calling me and being like, oh, I have another set of huge problems around growth and board and, all kinds of challenges. And it's just you're just sort of in a different class of growth problems, right? And sustainability problems.
From the outside looking in, before having all these conversations and digging deeper, you used to see the person that raised all that money though and say wow, they must not have as many the problems don't go away. It's a whole new set of problems, right? When you raise that additional amount of capital at that type of, when you're talking that amount. Marcus gave you a point.
Oh yeah,
so you get a point. Thanks, Marcus. For great question, Marcus, by the way, earlier on. That was good. I would love to hear from you for let's say a company starting today. They're just starting to, maybe they already have something in place, but let's say they're just putting the team together. They're raising those safe notes. They have this thesis, right? Let's say they raise $1 million in a safe. What are you putting your investor hat on, again here, what are you looking for, before they can raise that next round of funding? What are kind of some of the things that you think they need to hit for a checklist?
Yeah, I have several companies that I'm working with, and even this company that we're brewing up right now that we're in that. So for me, now operating too, being on that side where I'm throwing in my hat, and I'm like back to my roots of like pipeline management and like, trying to work a pipe, trying to get to LOIs, trying to get to MSA, like trying to sign, trying to book revenue, trying to repeat revenue. So 3 things. The first is, do you have a pipeline? Number 1, like, what's the quality of your pipeline? Who are you selling to? Do you understand your customer? You've been out there beating the bushes. What is the customer saying? What's the buyer appetite, right? 2 is, are you able to book some of that pipeline into, real POCs? And 3, who of your POCs are converting, right? So it's like, hey, if you're giving someone a huge discount, you're not even in your commercial pricing. You're still doing market discovery and pricing. You're like, well, I think it's this, I think it's that, but I got to get in there. Particularly if you're if you're some kind of SaaS play, you want people in your product and you want data running through your product. Like as an investor, and that's my investor hat, but even as an operator building, I'm like, I can have a bunch of engineers that are scoping and we're doing some really cool stuff. But if no one's actually in the product using it and I can't populate it with data, I don't even know if I built the right module, right? So it's like, absolutely. And, that can be like a certain amount of data, certain amount of lives, like whatever it is, that's the metric or the KPI around what you're measuring. But you have to have pipe, you have to have a couple POCs, you have to have people converting. I tend to be a lot less, this is me personally. I wouldn't say that my esteemed venture capital colleagues feel this way, but I am less concerned with revenue targets. Like I have a lot of boards that I'm on where it's like, we'll pick an arbitrary number. We'll be like, you have to book 750 before you even talk to someone, or you have to get to mill 2, whatever. I think it's like, it's really the quality. And then it's also sales motion. It's like, hey, how long is it taking to convert into commercial contracts and get some more logos? Is that going to be like an 18-month process? Because that's like, as an investor, you got to sign up for that, right? That's challenging, and that's the world of healthcare, right? But or do you have a pull through that's like 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months? So those are some of the things that I look at. I think there used to be a day where everybody was like very obsessed with defensible IP. I don't feel like that's as much of an issue these days in healthcare. There is a lot of services and business model innovation, and it's all like interesting go-to-market, particularly with value-based care. So I think that's interesting. Gen AI might be a little bit different now, and even value-based care tooling. Some of that is very IP defensible, but I think overall the industry and investors seem to be like, it's all about quality of revenue, pipeline. Is this repeatable and scalable? And, will you have some kind of differentiation or defensible position in the market as you grow? Like, is this team going to be the team that wins? Right? Particularly in a lot of sort of like healthcare is so piecemeal. Like what we're building in healthcare right now, it's like a better mousetrap because it's really hard to blow up the system. It's so entrenched. I've seen a couple of people do really interesting new insurance models where it's like, on-demand insurance, like, or insurance that's focused exclusively on employers so that self-insured employers can essentially be the back end and we create the network. I think some of those models are really super like revolutionary. And I think they're thinking big and they're well-funded. And I think there's a way. But in general, it's very, very hard to, build the new Uber of healthcare and like basically blow it up, right? Because of the way we're funded, government-wise and private.
Yeah, and it's a different investment climate today, right? Like you won't just keep getting like we actually just talked about separate, not related to healthcare, but like we're talking about would Uber be able to exist in this current climate, and they wouldn't just keep getting an endless bankroll until they got to that point, right? I think it was Mark Cuban in the early days had a chance to like invest in them, and the reason he turned them down was because he's like, I think you'll get there, but you're going to need hundreds of billions of dollars in order to get to where you want to be, which is going to take a really long time. And they eventually did it, right? But healthcare does not have, especially in this climate, that luxury to just keep hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to hope they can one day get there. Who do you think is going to be like the next major like acquisition? Like years ago, it was Livongo, right, by Teladoc. Who's next that you're like, that's going to be like people will be talking about that acquisition for years after that?
Well, we sort of saw that with Cerner and Oracle, right? I think we were like, wow, like one of the big EHRs is getting eaten. And that, that was kind of interesting. And I think a lot of people have speculated, I think that the ship has sailed on Epic ever being bought, but that could be very interesting. Just another sort of massive, my sense is that we're going to see one more big services company get bought by a big tech company. I think that's going to be, I predict that there will be one more of those. Now, we don't have any really good stats right now with Walmart kind of, retracting on retail. There's been so many op-eds out there as to like why that happened. And I don't think that that's part of a greater trend, to be honest. I think that's endemic to Walmart, and Walmart having some execution issues in the way that they try. This is, how many times have they tried to stand up clinics? So I still really believe that there's going to be an interesting, like we saw with Village MD being acquired, Oak being acquired, Signify, like all of these sort of folks were all these retailers were like lining up, big bets because they were like scared of the big badass Amazon and One Medical. And I think, things have kind of imploded and we've pulled back, but I don't think we're done yet. So my sense is that in a year, also, I think there's so much that's going to happen with this election cycle that I think will influence some macro trends about a big buy. So I have concerns about that as well. I think, depending on the outcome of the election, I think we could be dealing with a lot of other sort of noise and fray, right?
Yeah, and just like every year, I mean, once we get a few months out, it'll not press pause on things, but people proceed more cautiously, right, until they know what an outcome is before they move forward with something. It's certainly interesting. The Walmart thing too is I've heard a lot of frustration, not just that, it didn't work out, more so around how like the messaging, how it changed so fast though, to we want to launch all these new clinics beginning of the year, right, to a few months later. I think that's the more thing that I think a lot of people are hoping for more context at some point. Whether we get it or not, we'll see. But I think it just shows how hard it is though for companies that kind of come in. Healthcare is just so much different than like if you decided you wanted to start some random company in a different industry, right? You probably have a higher likelihood of making that work than someone coming into healthcare and trying to do the same thing without the experience. I think people underestimate the true bureaucracy of everything that has to go on here and just how hard it is to move something forward.
Yeah, it's super interesting too. And yet there are some sort of, I'm a caregiver. My mom's got multiple sclerosis and I'm living with her in this nice, beautiful, we moved from the Bay Area down to Southern California and bought this. I've never owned like a real big luxury piece of property. And like, so I'm like, and I was like, hey, if I'm going to like move my mom and her caregiving folks in, like, we got to have a pool. I've got to be able to float in the pool. And, I'm like if I'm like leaving the Bay Area, and I know these are like very sort of first world problem discussions. I feel very grateful, but, my caregiver, one of our professional caregivers who's here, who's like part of the family, be like equivalent to people that have young kids and have a nanny. We just adore her, but she's on vacation the next 2 weeks. And so I've been sort of like, I'm back to my caregiving roots. So I took my mom to UCI, to her MS doctor for her neurology appointment yesterday. And we were literally patient number 3 in this new, unbelievably squeaky clean, like campus. Just insane beauty. And every terminal was amazing. They were scanning stuff. Like it was just all the most high-end best of breed vendors that they had in there. They're an Epic shop as well. But I was just tickled pink by the throughput and the service and and that's like a large academic medical center that they just invested so much in, right down to sort of how you think about patient triage into like the waiting room, the furniture, and all the technology that goes with that. So I do have lots of hope when I experience as a consumer something that kind of high tech and savvy and efficient, that there is a way, right? It's just, going to take us a long time to get that kind of symmetry, right? Because not everybody has those kind of dollars. But it was fascinating to see. And my mom's like traditional fee for service. I'm not on any kind of Medicare Advantage plan. And just to parallel that, I got back from my honeymoon. I got married very late in life, and
congratulations again, by the way.
So exciting! I went to Bali for our honeymoon, and I'd never been to Indonesia. I just got back, and a very dear friend of mine, who has been a kind of a community activation, community leader, very very involved in politics, fell ill and had a very very serious life and death emergency, and got put into Kaiser Permanente. Look, I'm all for Kaiser. Kaiser's got fantastic outcomes. They've invested in technology. I have tons of friends that work there, including Fawad, who used to be the chief data officer, who I'm doing stuff with now, at our kind of stealth startup that we're in Gen AI. And I just have always had good experiences with Kaiser. But unfortunately, she could not medically advocate for herself, and we just got stuck in such a long queue. And it felt very like that's just the opposite experience, right? It felt extremely non-personalized, very kind of like the system's beating you down. We're getting lost in the system. And even the people that I had to interact with over and over and over again were like, that's not my job. That's not my job. Go here, do this, do that. Right. And that's the normal experience of like kind of how we're dealing with healthcare, which is not hyper-personalized, not consumer friendly, super bastardized with systems. The average low medical literacy patient cannot maneuver their way through, right? And that saddens me, right? Really, truly saddens me. And I, as someone who works in this space, I was just absolutely appalled at how difficult it was for us to get the outcome we needed. And I think, a lot of us lobbied and we finally did, and now things are better. But, that's unfortunate that that's the state we're in. 2 different experiences all within a week.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
2 different systems.
After coming right back too.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely.
Before we wrap up here, I have to ask, when you were in Bali, did you try a durian?
I did. Okay, let's just have a moment with that. So for folks that are listening, that is I think it's an endemic fruit to that area, because I haven't seen it anywhere else. And apparently it tastes really different than it smells. It has got the most rancid, if you leave it for a while, and it's a smell that follows you around, it does not leave you, right? Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah, it's banned on most flights.
Is that it's banned on flights because of the smell? Is that it?
Yeah, I need to find this guy, and maybe we bring it up. There's this guy online his YouTube video is "Durian is our drug," is what he writes it. But what's it called? I'm gonna pull this up on the screen as we wrap up here. We'll give people a nice little laugh.
They have jackfruit there. Jackfruit also, it's like, it literally is like a meat substitute. It's a fruit, but it's like they put it in their meals and it tastes like meat. Yeah, and then this is durian. It's so interesting. Bali was just magical. I mean, the culture, the people, I loved it.
This guy's hilarious. I follow all his stuff. He eats strange fruits you've never heard of, mainly in Bali.
Oh my God.
Let me pull it on the screen here.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So here he is.
This is the top 5 best tasting fruits in Bali. Number 5 is mangosteen, one of our absolute favorite fruits. It's tough on the outside, but sweet, juicy and fresh on the inside. Number 4 is red dragon fruits. Oh my God, Bali must have the best red dragon fruits in the world. Whereas many people taste imported dragon fruits and believe it has no distinct flavor at all, these ones taste like blueberry jam. Number 3 is utu. One of my favorite fruits of all time. Its flesh around the seed tastes like marzipan, whilst the soft inner part of the skin tastes like a sour yogurt. Number 2, the most special fruit on this list, Wani white mango. It lures you with an unexpected pearl white color inside, but what truly steals the show is its unusual taste of sweet toothpaste and bacon. And number 1 is durian, the smelliest fruit on the planet. It has creamy flesh that tastes like a thick whipped cream, with notes of white chocolate, vanilla and garlic. Did
you get that when you tasted it? You tasted garlic?
I didn't taste the garlic, but the creaminess, and it's messy. It doesn't come off your face. If you get it on your, it's very hard to remove. Bali hands down wins for the most funkiest out there fruit. Like every morning we got like all these funky fruits brought in, and I was like, all right, here we go. My husband was like, I'm diving in. He's very, very food, high risk on food. He'll eat anything off of any vendor, off of any street.
So this guy, I forget his name. If I find his name, I'll put it. I think it's just Fit Shorty or something like that. But he like only eats fruit, and like as his main thing. And he's always eating like the durian. But he said it's like you get used to it after a while, but it does smell bad. But it's just funny that like he's vegan and then like mainly eats fruit, right? And it's funny when he describes meat that, oh, this tastes like sausage.
Yeah,
and it's like like he was eating these like blueberries. He goes, oh, it tastes like sausage and toothpaste.
It's so funny. It's like, wait a minute. At one point you must have been consuming meat to have that taste.
I mean, I think that's how like what a lot of like at some point, right? There's that switch over, but yeah, if you're ever in for just watching hit all the fruits that he has,
awesome.
yeah, it's there's even all the different types of bananas are really cool too. There's a lot that have like seeds in them, and but yeah, anyway.
Well, I even in Bali, like the bananas in Bali are like, first of all, they grow on every single tree. You get coconuts and bananas everywhere you go. You could just like put a hand up and go. But the bananas are really small. They're like these little baby bananas. They're just so cute. I have to say, for any of the listeners out there, international travel just completely blows your mind. Like I just feel like, we're so busy here in healthcare and digital health. Like we're kind of myopic and heads down. Everybody's like trying to build companies or really sort of get out there and change the industry. And that's great. But it's really interesting when you go to other countries and you start, just if you're there as a tourist and you start looking at healthcare, how healthcare is procured. So we'll close with this. As part of my tour, I went and saw A Medicine Man. If anybody saw Eat, Pray, Love, the movie, or read the book with Julia Roberts was in the movie. The book's really famous. She goes, she gets a big divorce. She goes to Italy, Bali, and India. And she sees a medicine man in Bali. So it's made all the tourism really famous because, So I went and saw A Medicine Man, and, it felt a lot like acupressure and acupuncture, and there were some herbs involved, but I maybe saw him for 45 minutes, and he was like, didn't know anything about me. And he was like, you have this issue, that issue, that issue. Like, I'm just like so fascinated by all, our allopathic Western system is so, kind of binary, and it's great for acute, but there's so many other systems out there, and, just fascinated by all of that. So it was a lot of fun indeed.
Not to make fun of or anything like that, but I was watching Seinfeld the other day, and he goes to like a certain type of healer, and he's just looking at George, and then he looks over at Jerry. You're eating too much dairy, and then just switches back, just like by looking at,
That's perfect.
Or he does like this, and then puts his hands on his. Oh man, yeah,
I love it. Yeah.
Oh, Chris Saxman wants to know: was the medicine man fee for service or value-based care?
Oh, Chris! Oh my God, Chris! It's great to see you. Yeah, he was definitely fee for service, my friend. And it was funny because my husband's like not as much into complementary and alternative medicine. He's a little bit more straight and narrow. Well, he's not straight and narrow in general, but in this area. And he was just like, like, and when someone does a magic trick and like you're just trying to enjoy the magic trick, but then you've got someone on the side who's like, oh, I totally know how they're doing that. I figured it out, right? It's like, hey man, you're buzzing my special moment here. I love it.
Chris.
Man. Chris is awesome. Chris, I got to catch up with you. I want to hear what you're up to. I know I see you on LinkedIn a ton. I appreciate all the props.
Well, Missy, thanks so much. This was fun. You're a blast to talk to all the time, and can't wait for future conversations.
Yeah, we'll loop back in a couple weeks, hopefully, on AI healthcare for dummies. I've got some really interesting guests that want to talk. So we'll be spinning back your way. I appreciate the time. Bald